and John, you can have a seat up here. There's microphones for you to attach and get on. While they're doing that, I just want to give a quick shout out, thank you, that I forgot to mention before, to Bob Dorn. Bob is here on staff, but this is all thank you to Bob's taking initiative. He saw this pop up in an email, the opportunity for us to watch this documentary, and he brought it to our staff and jumped on the opportunity and even shared that with District 155 last night. They did a viewing there at Prairie Ridge High School. And it was opened up to District 47 as well. So thank you to Bob for that. And then also to Sharon Tiemann and Angela Coaluski. They're your child care providers tonight, so say thank you to them if they're picking up your kids. We're going to start with our discussion, but we are going to kind of close out child care about 8:15, just to be respectful for your kids and their time and their probably need to get to school tomorrow. So with that being said, we've got you guys up here. You're not going to wear microphones. I see that. You're scared. No microphones for you. But that's okay. I bet we'll be able to hear them. But let's just go ahead and begin. Do you guys want to introduce yourselves a little bit better than maybe what I did? I probably messed it up. So, yes, use this. Okay.
Okay. Oh, look. So I am Misty Berg. I am a high school counselor at Prairie Ridge. I'm a parent, first and foremost, of a 16-year-old, a 14-year-old, and a 12-year-old. This is what I live and breathe every day. I think I always said I was destined to be a counselor. Before working at Prairie Ridge, I worked at Amita now, but used to be Alexian Brothers, and then private practice on Randall Road. And I kind of came into the school so that I could build this relationship over 4 years with students and really get in some of this stuff.
I'm Dr. Melissa Katz. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. I work primarily with children and adolescents. I'm also the clinical director at Samaritan Counseling Center. I have a 5-year-old boy and a 2-year-old girl. And I'm also on the board of executives for NAMI, which is the National Alliance of Mental Illness. And part of what we really focus on there, which of course I do every day as a mom and a human, is just work on reducing the stigma that comes with mental illness and sort of generalizing it to the public and talking about it more. And I also am a coordinator for a nonprofit group for moms. So I feel like I daily have chosen to immerse myself in the kinds of issues that we're seeing in this movie and hopefully talking about tonight. So I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
I'm John Muhlendijk. Got this on the wrong way. Principal here at Emmanuel Lutheran. This is our first year, my family's first year here. We have 12-year-old and 10-year-old girls, and then a 7-year-old boy that are here. I've got about 15 years of educational experience, about 20 years of coaching experience, and I see a lot of kind of what was on here, probably more from the coaching side because of the intimate relationships that brings forth. Everything from coaching Little League boys up through college boys, and most recently working with a lot of inner city boys, high school boys in wrestling, which is a tough mental sport in itself. So a lot of work and understanding, both from the professional side in education, but also from that personal side as a family guy.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you all for being here. So before we get into some suggested questions that we have, I really want to open it up to you. Are there questions that you have that are probing you or just that you're thinking about? If you have those, you want to raise your hand, and I'll bring the microphone by. Sorry, you might have to talk into a microphone. Not yet. Okay, that's just fine. Oh, over there. I'm coming. Oh, John's there. Look at this. I feel like we're on a talk show. This is fun.
I know you guys probably don't have a one-size-fits-all, but I have a 15-year-old son who's a freshman, and I just am wondering, like, do you recommend a certain amount of time where you say, okay, I understand this is your social life and you need to connect with all of your friends, and that's how freshmen in high school are doing it. But do you say, okay, you can have it for X amount of hours after school, and then at 9 o'clock, I try to take his phone at night every night at like 9 or 10, but do you have any specific recommendations for like 15-year-olds? Because I'd be curious to hear them. Thanks.
I'll start. A couple things I would say as a parent is my oldest is 16, and I am very honest with her that I'm living this with her, so I'm learning as I go. Probably one of the most powerful things is the research. So because some kids can't read yet, but probably as a parent, the most powerful thing I've done is every time I read anything research related that says the why behind the limit, I do share it with my kids. So they probably know way too much research. But the why helps, they were talking in the film about kind of the buy-in there. The research is out there. Take out homework, but outside of homework, more than 3 hours is really affecting all of these different pieces. So I don't give my kids a number, but what we have gotten creative with is everybody sharing on your phone how much use you had every week, and make it a goal for your 15-year-old to do 1 hour less, for you to do a half an hour less, depending on how much you use. So yours is going to be different because you probably don't have that social world like he does on the phone, but making it a goal of a little less. And I think a really important piece is I always say, don't talk about what you're taking away, talk about what you're building in. And I think the phone in and of itself is not my concern. I think being in the district, and I'm a pretty strong advocate for no phones in school, and I'm not there yet, but it's not the phone, it's what they're missing out on when they're on the phone. And for me, the two big ones at this age is the coping and the connection. So just less than he currently is, and making kind of a game as a family out of, you're going to identify role modeling, I'm going to do less too.
I am always encouraging the families that I work with to raise whole, happy, healthy individuals. And I want to make sure that when kids are coming home from school, they are able to complete the work that they have to do for school. They are able to build social connections with other people. They are exercising and taking care of themselves. They're being helpful to the family. So I encourage each household to come up with what they feel like is appropriate and fits into their family dynamics in terms of, we want you to know what's going on in the world. Please come to dinner with one article or something that you'd like to discuss that's a current event. Did you do that? Did you help unload the dishwasher? Did you finish your homework? Did you make plans with a friend? Did you go for a walk? Did you exercise? So are they contributing to all parts of their own sort of society so that they're contributing? And then I care less about the amount of time they're spending on their phone, because by the nature of adding all of those things to do first, their phone's away and they're spending less time on it. So I agree with what you're saying. It's tricky because they are connecting in that way. But I think that we're missing out on all of the other pieces that make us whole, healthy individuals.
It's good for me. No, what they touched on were two great things, and I like what both said. And Missy talked about what are you missing out on, and Melissa. Sorry, was talking about those things that you're putting in place if you're missing out on them. And I think that's an important part of it, is if you are putting in place those things that you might be missing out instead of, time becomes less important. Now, the research does say 2, maybe 3 hours is kind of that where the science of the brain starts crumbling, essentially. And then the biggest thing is what you said, is those phones out of the bedroom at night is one of the biggest. They talked about sleep, and that's huge. So those parts of the time I would agree with.
And my kids are little too. They're only in that 1 hour time frame. And so we can set limits on the iPad to say, oh, shoot, it looks like your iPad's out of time. Let's go find something else to do. I don't know if you can do that with older kids.
You can.
But I'm still in that framework where I'm able to say, oh, shoot.
And we do with our 12-year-old. She got a phone because we moved, we were going to wait till about 8th, 9th grade, but because we moved, it'd be a good way to connect and stay in contact with. But my wife, Jessica, has done a real nice job of figuring out how to only allow certain times and time periods, and when she runs out, it's done. It's the same thing as you would do with a 3-year-old, except we're doing it with a 12-year-old. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Great. Any other questions right now in regards to that? Yeah. Coming your way.
I don't know if addiction is too strong of a word, but are there numbers for teenagers, levels of addiction, signs of addiction, and how do you deal with that if you see that happening with your teenagers or even adult children?
I'll let counselors answer that first. Counselors, therapists.
So there is a lot of research, I don't know the number, but where they're studying the brain of a teenager that's using like 7 to 9 hours a day, and they are finding it does look similar to a brain that is addicted to alcohol or drugs. So yes, they are making ties to a true addiction. I think Melissa brings up a great point, no matter what age you are, is what might you be doing if you weren't on that media, whatever that is. So rather than talking about decreasing it or what that looks like, building in all of these things, I do think it's important to, in general, come up with your no-tech zones is kind of what I call it. And in those no-tech zones, it's the idea behind it is building in the connection, the coping, all of these other pieces. And as a family, you got to decide what those look like. For me, big ones, absolutely the bedroom. We came up with a contract, so each kid kind of, depending on their age, knows it's just written there. I think it's powerful for the kid to bring it to that spot. We just have a random counter in our kitchen. But another big one is like the front seat of the car. As they get older, faster and faster, you lose that time with them when they start driving on their own. So I think that front seat of the car, sometimes, especially for a male, I'm going to pick on a male because I'm raising a male, but everything's fine. They don't say much. So I think being kind of stuck in that car, that's a great no-tech zone. I also do think when you're involved in sports and things like this, I always love the coach that says no phones at practices or tournaments and things like that. So I appreciate that. But yes, the research is out there, and I think it's more about replacing it with something positive for that kid. I love the kid who said, I started skateboarding again, versus no.
Your question is actually on the forefront of what we all should be studying. The newest version of the DSM, which is how we are classifying and making diagnoses as clinicians, recently came out. It's a bit newer, and in there is, I believe, some sort of electronic addiction or something along those lines. Because it's new, I would have to look up for you exactly what it was that qualifies that, and I'm happy to do that if anyone would like my contact information after. But I think that there is not as much research on that because it is so new, but they are, again, starting to study it more and more.
I definitely see it as far as addiction goes, because addiction in general is how the brain reacts to the stimulus, and then when that stimulus is taken away, how does it react? On the video, even towards the beginning, we saw where the people that have phones on them very regularly, their stress levels go up the longer they're without that phone, whereas the people that use their phone periodically, it might raise quicker, but then it plateaus. So yes, to answer your question, absolutely. To answer the second part of your question, Don, which I think was, what do you do if you start seeing that? And it would be the same thing that we were told, what do you do if you think that child might be using drugs, child might be using alcohol, child might be addicted to something else, which is starting to look towards the professionals for what do we do with that.
Great. Thank you. Next question. Hands going up. I have a quick question for you guys. You know, we see more and more, as a mom myself, we see more and more of technology being used in the classroom, both in good ways, I like that, but also with Chromebooks coming home with kids. You know, we set rules. We have Xfinity in our house. I have a 16-year-old, and we have now where the Wi-Fi just turns off after a certain limit on their phone, and my 16-year-old does not like this. And so he said, he said survival of the fittest, and then he grabbed his Chromebook. And so he's assuming he's surviving, But anyway, the point is, like, we see them using different devices. Can you talk a little bit about in the classroom versus, I don't know, how that's a lot of screens.
It's important for our students to know how to use the technology that's here. If we were to completely shut it off, then we're shutting them off from what's actually happening in the world. At the same time, using the technology and the screens to do the learning as opposed to supplement the learning are two different things. So what we want to do here at Emmanuel is we want to supplement with technology. Each of the students in the upper grades has a Chromebook, and all of the students eventually have some sort of access to a Chromebook, but we don't do it so we can sit on those screens and that's the learning that's going on. We do it because learning's been happening, and then we can use that technology and some of those good things you were talking about, Laura, to supplement what we're already learning.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I think when it first came in District 155, we really struggled. I think, honestly, it's reminding yourself it's a tool, just like the textbook is and the teacher is. And so as long as we're using it as a tool and not to replace what that real instruction is supposed to be.
Thank you. Any other questions I'm missing right now? Question back here. Let me come. We need to be able to hear you loud and clear.
Hi, thanks a lot for doing this. Can you speak to the athletic exercise component regarding depression and cell phone use?
We both looked at you first. I can speak to it if you want to gather thoughts. I'll speak.
Yeah.
From the athletic perspective, play and movement, from the educational perspective, play and movement is going to create neurological connections in the brain. And ultimately, when we're watching this Screenagers, or we're talking about anything that has to do with the development of our children, we're talking about how is the brain affected here. The brain is what's going to control. The brain is what's doing the learning, and we want those neurological connections to happen. So movement, coordination, a lot of that helps with those neurological connections. If we spend the time sitting in front of the TV instead of being outside with friends, if we spend the time playing video games instead of joining the basketball team, because I just don't feel like it, they're not getting as much play and movement as they can. I mean, the athletic part of it, you're not doing the athletics, so you're not getting the athleticism. But more importantly, as far as I'm concerned as a principal and a father, is that neurological connection that happens with play and that happens with full body movement. So I see a lot of that, the screen time, especially excessive screen time, taking away not just from the physical health of our students, but also from the academic and brain health of our students.
I guess I paused because I'm trying to best understand what it is that you're asking. I think that what I'm trying to differentiate in my brain is, are we talking about like an actual clinical sample of depressed people, or our teenagers who we think might be kind of sad sometimes? Because what we know is people who are more active in general tend to feel better. And we recommend exercise as a daily part of anyone's routine. If you have someone who definitely qualifies for clinical depression, they will not necessarily feel better from just exercising, because even though it is pushing through all of those endorphins, we've reached a level where our functioning isn't going to be helped by just probably some of those simple changes.
And the only thing I had to add is I think, you always want to be careful raising 3 kids who are very different. I love how the one clinician talked about behavioral activation. That can be an instrument, that can be a sport, that can be art, making sure we find their niche, because that's what's going to kick in those endorphins and hopefully the connection with other people who are interested in that.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Any other questions right now? Things you're thinking of?
I was wondering if you could talk about your experience or recommendations for screen use with kids who are diagnosed with ADHD.
Do you mean like, sorry, do you mean like thoughts about it in general, or like limiting it versus certain amounts of time, or do you have a specific question about that, or just?
Well, I have a child with ADHD, and so I feel like between my two kids, I noticed that my child with ADHD appears more addicted to a screen than my child who doesn't have that diagnosis. And so I guess my question is, how do you regulate that? And I understand you're saying about, okay, chores, homework, outside play, athletics, you know, I mean, and I have my daughter in athletics and dance and art and all sorts of things. But I'm just wondering if there's any different recommendations for a child with ADHD versus a child who doesn't have it. Because I look at her and I feel like she's jonesing for her, you know, I mean, that's how she really, like, that is the guiding light in her life. Like, when when she's done with something, bam, we are on the screen as soon as possible, as soon as she has completed whatever else I've asked her to do. And I sometimes feel like this doesn't look healthy, you know? So I guess that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying. That helps me sort of explain what I'm thinking. I think that a lot of times what we forget about ADHD is the hyper-focus part. So when we have a hyper-focus, we're sort of just zooming in on what is right in front of us at the expense of everything else going on around us. So I completely understand how it could seem like a child with ADHD is more kind of motivated and into their electronic. There's a lot going on in the brain at the same time that's being stimulated. So kids who have ADHD do really enjoy all of that action that's happening at the same time. I would say use the screen in this case to your advantage. I don't mean like give multiple hours per day, but we are all reinforced by something. We go to work so that we can have money, so that we can pay our bills. I mean, that's just how our society is set up. So I find that a lot of families who come to me and they have conflict or arguments over the amount of screen time, I am usually helping them to implement behavioral interventions. So think about what your limit would be for the day. When my child wakes up, by the nature of waking up in the morning, you are granted 1 hour of screen time. However, if you do things that I don't enjoy, or you're breaking rules or speaking disrespectfully, or however it is that you design it to be in your family, you can take those minutes away. And so you also could add minutes. So if you're okay with an hour and a half a day, or you're okay with only a half hour a day, then you're sort of working with that time frame to say, gosh, I really love how you just listened the first time. That makes me super proud of you. You can earn 5 more minutes of screen time today. But if you're doing it in that sort of a way, I would maybe not have it done sort of sporadically throughout the day, like you get 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there. I, again, would make sure you're doing all of the things that you need to do to contribute to society, and then you're using that as a reward at the end of the day. That's just one perspective, though. There are a lot of different ways that people are using that.
Hi. With all the screen time at home, but also the increase at schools with the Chromebooks, 2 of my kids are complaining of increase in headaches and eye issues. I'm just wondering if there is research on that, if there is an increase, with the screen time showing more of those with those issues.
Yes, I'll be honest. Most of the research I read is the social emotional side, because that's my passion. But even we were just in the eye doctor, and she whipped out this stuff. So I know there is with definitely the eyes. I think that's what causes the headache, they would argue, is the strain on the eyes. But I don't know much about that.
do we have any medical professionals in the house? I don't know the exact answer to that. I think that's a great question for a pediatrician. I am not 100% confident, but I'm pretty sure even with the little ones, they're recommending an hour because of all of the blue lights that are incorporated within the screen. I don't know if it's necessarily what the kids are watching, or if it matters if they're watching it on the big TV or like an iPad or a device like that, but I'm pretty sure that it is a component of it is that vision piece that is recommended for only that 1 hour because of that. Didn't make sense?
Yeah,
Made
no.
sense in my head.
I'm not an expert in this part of it, but the last time we were at the eye doctor, it is the blue light, and you can get a special like film or something on your glasses to like filter that out for you. So you can talk to your eye doctor.
Ours was good too.
Yeah.
Seems like something that the schools should take into consideration.
And I need to go on record to say I would love no technology, but that'll never happen. But I do think most of the time in talking with young kids, the 7 to 9 hours they're averaging is outside of homework. So I do agree that maybe if you add up all the time in school that they're on it is going to stick to a couple hours. It's really their social time that's going to be the leading cause of eye problem.
I was gonna basically say the same kind of thing. The amount that we're using it in the school shouldn't be enough to cause that effect. It's more of the outside and the close-up range for that.
Just make one comment before we run out of time. You ask a lot about what can I do and what kind of tools are available. The little half sheet of paper that you got when you came in, that's a page from the Screenagers website, and the website is screenagersmovies.com. And if you go to the resources, those little blocks, those are active on their site. And one of the things that are on there is called Tech Tuesday. Every Tuesday, there's an e-newsletter that goes out to anybody who subscribes. It's free of charge. And it's all geared towards what kind of questions can I start to engage my son or daughter or parent, actually, about the Screenager topics. And there's the other printed page. We got that from that site also. So those things are available to you. And there's a lot of other things on that particular site to do it in one form or another. I know we said we were going to pull the plug at 8:15. So I just want to say thank you so much for coming to this. And I would encourage you, if you have friends, relatives, neighbors that are having the same issue, and I can't imagine you're not, encourage them to at least get the newsletter to start the conversation of what's going on in one form or another. And as we get more and more things from this particular resource, we will pass it along, at least within our congregation, and also to people like at District 155 and Melissa, whoever, that we can disseminate the information along with the program, because it is I think one of the greatest social issues right now within family development, and we need to figure out how we work with our children so they can move forward in a positive manner, as opposed to us sitting back and say, oh my gosh, the sky is falling. The sky is not falling. We just have to figure out how we cope with it. And with our three panelists, I think they give us some good ideas on how to go about doing that in one form or another. Laura, do you have anything else?
Bob, can I just add, as
Sure.
you use, the resources are unbelievable, and I too have the Tuesday one, but make sure your kids are reading it with you, and especially if you see something, pull them into this education and research part, because that's the why behind it, and that's the most powerful way for your student to make the change for themselves.
All right, well, thank you so much. Any other ending comments, things we're forgetting that you're like, oh, I wish we could have talked about? Are you feeling?
I'm going to steal one just
Okay,
because
good.
it's my favorite part of that.
Knew it.
And I will make this quick. But probably my biggest takeaway from this was the section where the clinician had gone in and done the research, where they were doing the computer game, and in helping our kids, our stress goes down, but our kids goes up. And a lot of kind of my educational piece with students and families right now is the difference between coping and support. And I always say, I'm gonna take some of this blame. Way back when I was a crisis worker in Chicago and kind of the mental health field where it was, is we got really good at offering support. And I'm gonna say from the school, from the parents, we got this great era of offering our kids support. The problem is we stopped talking about the coping aspect. And so when they kind of went into that, and then one of the clinicians was kind of talking about that power of validation. And I think I need to remember so often in my day, I'm a pretty good counselor, but for some reason when I get home at night and with that 16 and 14 and 12-year-old, I lose sight of my counseling skills, and all I want to do is step in and help. And I think for me, it's constantly remembering, listen, validate. So much of that emotion is important for them in figuring out what to do. And I always say, any emotion in and of itself is not bad. It's not negative. So letting them feel that emotion and validate that emotion. And then that last step is, and what do you want to do about it? What would make this better? When he talked about the kid needs to kind of sit so that the next time a problem comes along, they don't have a lifeline with you. They remember, wait a minute, last time when I was feeling this, this is what I did. I'm going to go try this. That's the power at this age, helping them. You know, the one girl, stress is inevitable. Life is coming at them. So the more we can, as parents, remember it's not about decreasing our stress. I don't think that's our intent initially, but it's about helping them build the skills so that they can manage life. And that's going to be the listen, validate no matter what that emotion is, and then that follow-up question. What's going to make this better? What do you want to go try right now?
I agree and appreciate all of that, truly and genuinely. What I find to be interesting about this movie is that we are talking about technology and screens in my clinical practice as a presenting problem. So families will come in and they'll discuss the amount of conflict that's in their home, they'll discuss anxiety, they'll discuss the child's symptoms of depression, and what ends up happening is that we are able to create family change in the way that they talk about in this movie. We are able to become better parents. We're able to become better partners to our children and to each other. And I think that learning those skills in any context, in any family, is helpful for everyone. And I appreciate that the point of this was to discuss screen time and how to reduce that. But I think, in my opinion, the larger message is, what can we be doing to support kids growing up in such a time of stress, because things are going to keep changing, and we have to help teach them to be adaptive and to come to us. And even when we are not cool because we don't know about Instagram, we still will have taught them how to handle those kinds of situations.
Yeah, I could talk for a long time about a number of the things in the movie, but there were two in particular, and you both kind of touched on both of them. Missy, particularly yesterday when we were at Prairie Ridge, said the same kind of thing, which is about that whole era of support, but we weren't really focused on the coping. And the movie, so we talked up here a lot about kind of the first movie, actually, the science behind a lot of it. This one in particular, talking about the resilience aspect. And they use the word validate a lot, but I don't think they used enough of what Missy was talking about, which is then allowing them, teaching them how to cope, asking them questions on how to help solve these problems, or other coping skills. Breathing's a big one. Just being able to take deep breaths to help with stress and anxiety, and to be able to speak that then, because even if they have emotions they want to talk about, they won't always talk about them. So giving them those opportunities. The other thing that hit me biggest here was that experiment where the parents' anxiety was high watching their child go through a difficult time. And is Dr. Russo in that NAMI? Not sure. I listened to a doctor.
On the video?
No, the organization you're a part of. That's okay. What did you say it was? NAMI. I thought he was a part of it. So this Dr. Russo talks about stress for children is important. No.
Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. he talks about how children need stress. Stress is a good thing. It creates resilience, and so many times when we see our children stressed, we want to take that away from them because it makes us feel good. But what it does is actually, from the video, is creating more. So allowing your child to struggle is a good thing. We want to be there to help them when it gets bad, but we don't want to be the controlling aspect of it. So we can allow to help them to grow. But that experiment in particular, and I'll close with this, reminded me, going biblically now, of what Christ does for us, right? He takes it from us so that he can have that pain, so that he experiences it for us, and we don't get that punishment, and we don't have that sin and pain that we may deserve. He takes it from us. When we put ourselves in place and control the situation from our children, we're not actually taking it from them, we're increasing it. So we need to live with the stress and the pain that watching them struggle is creating, so that their stress isn't increasing, but they're learning how to handle the problem that's at hand. So I just wanted to kind of close with, it's okay and good to allow that to happen. They're learning from it. It's a good thing.
There's a great TED Talk called Stress is My Friend. It's a woman who kind of walks through biologically why it's positive, the heartbeats and the sweating and all of these different pieces. Great to watch with, yourself, but if you have a kid who might be struggling with stress or anxiety, great TED Talk.
Sorry, I have one more thing because this is just so good. And please feel free to leave if, I think that what is really important to consider is what is clinical versus non-clinical. So people are stressed. We want people to be stressed. Again, this is exactly what you're saying. Yerkes-Dodson came up with this cool law where they talk about athletes, and if you have an Olympic athlete and they're good at what they do and they go into what they're doing and they're not stressed, they're going to actually perform worse. So we need a bit of stress in order to fuel us to do well. What I care about as a clinician is when our symptoms are impacting our daily functioning. So if we are unable to do the things that we need to do in order to survive and do well, that's when I encourage people to go get some help about it so that we can learn kind of these bigger coping skills such as mindfulness or CBT or exposure or a lot of the things that they talked about in the movie. For the general population, when we're raising anxious kids, they're going to be okay. They need a little bit of that. But again, I would just watch for your kids, eating more, eating less, sleeping more, sleeping less. Things that used to be fun aren't fun anymore. They are doing a lot of avoidance in school. Those are the kinds of things that I would be concerned about. Sorry.
Oh, don't say sorry. Thank you so much. And I want to just thank you guys so much for being here tonight, offering your professional opinions and your personal opinions of what happens in your homes, too. We really appreciate that. I think our last piece that we just want to end with, and what a pleasure that we're here this evening in this Christian environment, too. And let me encourage you that you can always take your cares, your concerns to God through prayer. And I'll even throw in those little things with my boys, pray about it. Encourage them to make that a part of their life. I know when I was a kid and went through a very hard time at 16 years old with a brother being diagnosed with cancer, prayer was my answer and helped me grow in faith. So let me encourage you to encourage your families as well in that regard. But, of course, all of this is just as important. So thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. Please feel free to stick around and ask questions. Is that okay? Okay. Thank you again.
And she just laughed about it. But the third graders all day, they walk by me. I know you do. And the boys. So when he felt really bad, and I said, I think it was all worked out.
Yeah, it worked out.
But he found something. Okay, well, I just wanted to apologize to you.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate
I
it.
said, DJ went on the bus.
Yeah, I sure do. You too. It's good to see you.